Hello, welcome, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Melinda Herring, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council here in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event, recognizing 30 years of diplomatic relations between Kazakhstan and the United States. Before we get started, I must thank our friends at the Central Asia Program at George Washington University's excellent Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies and the Embassy of Kazakhstan for organizing what I know will be a really great event. In December 2021, Kazakhstan will celebrate the 30th anniversary of its independence from the Soviet Union. Since 1991, the United States and Kazakhstan have worked together on a broad range of initiatives, including nuclear non-proliferation, counterterrorism, and energy security, just to name a few. This partnership has helped promote peace and stability in Central Asia and made Kazakhstan a leader in the region. With a new administration in office, now is the perfect time to take a step back, reflect on what we've done together, and figure out where we want to go for the next 4 years. So we've assembled the perfect team for that task here today. Our distinguished group of Kazakh and American diplomats will discuss the successes of our relationship and look ahead to the future. First, I'd like to welcome Ambassador John Herbst, the director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, who will moderate today's panel discussion. It's also my great pleasure to introduce our friend, Ambassador Kazikhanov, Ambassador to the Republic of Kazakhstan, who will kick off our conversation in just a few minutes. Also joining us for today's panel discussion is the Honorable Andy Weber, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs under President Barack Obama. He will be joined on our panel by Ambassador Nurgaliev, Kazakhstan's ambassador to the United States from 1996 to 2000, and Ambassador Ordway, U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan from 2004 to 2008. Thank you all so much for joining us. And before I turn it over to Ambassador Herbst, one housekeeping note. This, of course, is a Zoom panel, but we want it to be interactive. So please use that Q&A function in the Zoom handle down below. Now I'm pleased to hand over the discussion to Ambassador Herbst, who will offer an American perspective on the 30 years of relations between the U.S. and Kazakhstan. Please enjoy this discussion. It's great to see so many people here and excited about Kazakhstan. Ambassador Herbst, the floor is yours.
As always, I started before unmuting. Melinda, thank you very much. I want to start with something that's well understood in Central Asia, but less well understood in the United States. Central Asia is literally the center of the great Eurasian landmass and critical for global stability. The great British geographer Alfred Mackinder wrote at the start of the 20th century that the power controlling Eastern Europe controls the heartland, and the power controlling the heartland controls the world island, and whoever controls the world island controls the world. Central Asia is Mackinder's heartland, and it borders on two of the world's great powers, China and Russia, and has as its neighbors India, Pakistan, and Iran, also major powers. The Soviet Union imploded 30 years ago. 5 new states emerged in Central Asia, and some observers were deeply concerned that chaos would ensue. The civil war that quickly engulfed Tajikistan at that time fueled this pessimism. But by the late 90s, with help from its neighbors, peace was established in Tajikistan. And the 5 Central Asian states proved to be resilient. While there were certainly growing pains that exist to this day, the states established and maintained their sovereignty and territorial integrity. And there was no chaos, and no opportunity for the neighboring regional and great powers to do major mischief in Central Asia, in the heartland. There is no single reason for this great outcome, but one important factor was the success and development of Kazakhstan and in the development of the U.S.-Kazakhstan relationship. Nursultan Nazarbayev, who led independent Kazakhstan for nearly 3 decades, played a critical role here. First, he understood the importance of markets instead of a Soviet-style state control of the economy. 2, he recognized the need to partner with the West and not rely simply on old relations with Moscow or its larger neighbors. The Tengiz deal with Chevron was one result and proved essential for developing the country's hydrocarbon resources. Equally important was Kazakh's decision to give up its nuclear weapons. While this involved more than the US, the other principal nuclear powers were also involved. The US role was critical. We are marking today 30 years of good relations between Washington and Nur-Sultan. The years have been good for Kazakhstan, which has emerged as a middle-income country and a player on the world stage, whether at the UN National Security Council or as chairman of the OSCE. We celebrate this in Washington because we understand that our cooperation with Kazakhstan promotes stability and prosperity in Central Asia, and that very much serves our interests. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Ambassador Kazikhanov. Please, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador Herbst. Thank you very much. And I would like to welcome everyone. It's a great honor and privilege for me to participate in this distinguished panel. And I would like to welcome Andy Weber, Ambassador John Ordway, Ambassador Nurgaliev. And I also would like to thank the team from Central Asian Program of the George Washington University, and Ms. Melinda Herring and Ambassador Herbst Yu from Eurasian Center of the Atlantic Council for being with us today. If you permit me, I will make a few welcoming remarks at the beginning. And I would like to start by saying that we regard the United States as a reliable partner that has provided unwavering support for Kazakhstan's sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, ongoing political modernization, and sustainable economic growth. For almost 3 decades, as you rightly mentioned, constructive dialogue and close cooperation with the United States has been a backbone of Kazakh-American bilateral relations, facilitating trade, political stability, and prosperity of our nations. 30 years ago, First President Nazarbayev laid down a comprehensive long-term strategy aimed at complete dismantlement and removal of nuclear arsenals from Kazakh territory, making Kazakhstan a non-nuclear state and reliable partner globally. In return for bringing peace and security to the region, Kazakhstan has emerged as a leading economy in Central Asia, attracting more than 350 billion foreign direct investments during our independence. Today, more and more American companies entering Kazakhstan market, and we hope that this trend will continue further. Now, the new normal is forming in the world after spread of the novel coronavirus. Kazakhstan broad interaction with the United States remains one of the most important priorities. We fully support Biden's administration view that democracy is the root of our society, the wellspring of our power, and the source of our renewal. The political reforms that are taking place in Kazakhstan are of irreversible and evolutionary nature. We approve a series of bold steps towards strengthening democratic values and promote civil society engagement in the political process. As you know, that 3 years ago, during the visit of President Nazarbayev to Washington, two countries elevated its relations to the level of the enhanced strategic partnership that ensured development and prosperity not only in Kazakhstan, but in the entire region of Central Asia. And despite pandemic, Kazakhstan looks forward to building new momentum to promote our regional cooperation within the C5+1 format. In this context, we confirm our commitment to regional and coordinated efforts to further stabilization of the situation in Afghanistan. We see great potential for global partnership in environmental issues. Kazakhstan, as a party of the Paris Agreement, is enthusiastic about the United States' return to the Paris Accord. To sum up, we remain committed to address these and other common challenges and further strengthen our dialogue on a wide range of issues, including global peace and security, economic resilience and environment, human rights, and women empowerment. And I hope one day I will be invited to a similar webinar to celebrate 50th anniversary of Kazakh-US relations and sharing my views of our interaction with the Trump and Biden administrations. Thank you, and I wish you productive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kazikhanov. I think we now turn to Andy Weber.
Thank you, Ambassador Kazikhanov, Ambassador Herbst. So 30 years ago today, or actually 30 years ago tomorrow, I was on an airplane flying from Frankfurt back to Washington. And I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, and the headline was, American Embassy Almaty for diplomats who find Paris a bore. And it was all about the opening of our new embassy, the establishment of relations. Ambassador Bill Courtney, our first ambassador, raising the flag in our embassy office in the Hotel Kazakhstan. And it was just a very exciting article. So the next day I went into my personnel officer at the State Department and volunteered to go to this exciting country. And I spent the next year in Russian language training and arrived in July of 1993. And one of the things that made Kazakhstan so important was the fact that it at the time it had inherited the fourth largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world. So the stakes were very, very high. And I got to Kazakhstan in the summer of 1993, and it was extraordinary, the events of the next few months. We had, as an indication of how important it was, we had visits, very small embassies, so it wasn't easy, but we managed visits of the Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, Vice President Al Gore in December of '93. And that was when Kazakhstan's parliament ratified the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear state, a really historic day. And then Secretary of Defense William Perry came a few weeks later. So this little embassy outpost was extraordinary, and we had amazing relations with our counterparts, including some of you who are on the call today, Ambassador Kazikhanov, Ambassador Nurgaliev. The foreign ministry was also small, not quite as small as our embassy, but we interacted almost every day in some way at all levels of the government of Kazakhstan. President Nazarbayev was personally engaged frequently with us on issues, the whole range of non-proliferation issues. Obviously, nuclear non-proliferation was the top priority at the time, but it's lesser known that Kazakhstan inherited the world's largest biological weapons factory in a place called Stepnogorsk, Kazakhstan, that had been, prior to that, a secret city just with a post office box number. And thanks to President Nazarbayev's early decision, really at the birth of newly independent Kazakhstan 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, was to renounce weapons of mass destruction of all kinds, nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. And in a project that lasted quite a few years, we safely dismantled this horrible factory that was built to produce, during a wartime mobilization period, 300 metric tons of anthrax agent. Just an extraordinary, almost evil scale that could be enough anthrax to kill everybody on the planet. By spring of 1995, the last nuclear weapon was withdrawn from Kazakhstan's territory, but we also had to deal with the legacy of the nuclear weapons testing at Semipalatinsk. And in a project that lasted over 17 years, we secured the materials, the plutonium especially, that had been left in a series of tunnels at Dagolin Mountain. So the cooperation along the way was amazing. The first president, Nazarbayev, was steadfast in his commitment to rid Kazakhstan of the legacy of weapons of mass destruction. And this was obviously a very high priority for the United States. And I had the privilege of working together with Kazakhstan on these issues for most of the 30 years of my government career in different roles at the Defense Department. And it was just really an incredible adventure. And we had, the thing about Kazakhstan, it just gets into your blood. It's like a family. And some of the people on the phone today, I've worked with for many, many decades since the birth of Kazakhstan. And, we share meals at our homes and are, friends with our families. And it just sticks with you because the people are so wonderful and so gracious. And today, Kazakhstan remains just such an important country. Just one example of one of our achievements, the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which I had the pleasure of working on for many, many years. Together with Kazakhstan, we built a central reference laboratory to act as a center for disease control for Central Asia. And it's played a very, very important role in Kazakhstan's response to the COVID pandemic. And that, is an achievement, something that we built together and is now fully operational. And it's a great example to the world of what can be accomplished when two countries work together. And then the final example I'll give, because it was very exciting to me personally, was Project Sapphire. Kazakhstan had about 600 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium at the Ulba Metallurgical Factory in East Kazakhstan, in Uсть-Kamenogorsk, or Askamen. And in 1994, when President Nazarbayev visited with President Clinton, we had a secret meeting at Blair House across the street in the private quarters where President Nazarbayev was staying with his family. And we agreed really on the outlines of what later became Project Sapphire. We worked together in secret over many months to package and fly back to the United States enough weapons usable, highly enriched uranium for several dozen nuclear weapons. And thanks to that tremendous accomplishment, and Ambassador Nurgaliev was one of the leading partners in that effort. Today, we don't have to worry about rogue states or terrorist groups getting their hands on this massive supply of uranium. So thank you so much for allowing me to join today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Andy, thank you very much. Ambassador Nurgaliev, please. And unmute yourself. Don't do what I do.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ambassador Herbst, for your introduction. I was told that you have two questions posed to me, one concerning the decision of Kazakhstan to divest of nuclear weapons, and another, the role that the Tengiz oil deal, how it propelled our bilateral relationship forward. So I'll talk about these two particular issues, and I totally share the assessment by my old good friend Andy Weber, whom I, as he mentioned, know from early 90s, that the issue of nuclear weapons sort of predetermined the focus of American diplomacy on our country. At the initial stage in early 90s, it was overshadowing everything else. My personal involvement in the topic started in June 92, when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that was hectic time. There wasn't a single week when Alma-Ata was not hosting this or that foreign dignitary from what we now term as the collective West. Besides Americans, we had high-level, ministerial level officials from Japan, UK, France, Germany, South Korea. I remember very well, November 92, there was a visit of the then Secretary General of NATO, Manfred Werner. And there was a gap 1 hour between the two meetings, and it turned out that he had a hobby of collecting Oriental rugs. So we were told that there is a shop trading in Kazakh handmade carpets in the basement. He liked one and was very astonished when he learned that the price is just $50. He said, oh, is it $50? Then I'd like to have 4 of these carpets. But of course, the top priority for Manfred Wörner and all other Western visitors was the question of what Kazakhstan was going to do with the nuclear arsenal it inherited from the Soviet Union, and how soon Kazakhstan was going to join the NPT as a non-nuclear state. Practically all high-level foreign officials were received by President Nazarbayev. I was present at the meetings with the English-speaking officials in the capacity of interpreter, and remember very well how patiently our president was explaining to his guests that while Kazakhstan's determination to denuclearize was there, he, as the head of state, wanted a helping hand from the West in dealing with pressing economic problems and political and security challenges. He would produce a map with Kazakhstan at the center, something akin to this one. Not that gentlemen like Stroke Talbot or Steve Sestanovich or Nicholas Burns or Graham Allison needed lectures on political geography, but what President Nazarbayev was trying to convey that Kazakhstan occupied a pivotal space as the only Central Asian republic that shares borders with both Russia and China. And situated in a difficult and diverse region, still emerging from the communist past and challenged by extremist forces, Kazakhstan wanted to play a role as a source of ethnic harmony, political stability, and natural resources. In October '93, Andy mentioned that there was a visit of Secretary of State Warren Christopher. And during the meeting with President Nazarbayev, he proposed that if an umbrella agreement on dismantlement of nuclear weapons was signed immediately by him and Kazakh officials, then he would recommend to the White House to host President Nazarbayev next month. And President Nazarbayev said that while Kazakhstan is ready to denuclearize, he would like to get in return security guarantees, as well as trade and economic agreements, plus a roadmap for intensification of contacts, relationship in diverse spheres. Christopher's visit was followed by the visit December '93 of Vice President Albert Gore. During that visit, an agreement was signed between Kazakhstan and the United States concerning the destruction of silo launches of ICBMs, emergency response, and the prevention of the proliferation of nuclear weapons. The culmination of these high-level exchanges was in DC in February '94, when on St. Valentine's Day, President Nazarbayev and President Clinton signed a charter on democratic partnership. That was a unique, and I think still is, document for the post-Soviet space. 17 articles of this charter cover all the topics ranging from recognition of Kazakhstan's decision to join the NPT as a non-nuclear state. It was considered a valuable contribution to international security and arms control, and also the commitment to intensify contacts in political, economic, cultural fields, science and technology, ecology, especially in the area of the Aral Sea, and joint research on the damage caused by the Soviet nuclear testing program at the Semipalatinsk nuclear test range. Throughout these 30 years, Kazakhstan lived up to its commitments, becoming an example of responsible behavior in the international nuclear non-proliferation regime, having adhered to the NPT, CTBT, the IAEA safeguards regime, and actively promoting the nuclear weapons-free zone in Central Asia. I would like to pay tribute to those who were instrumental in arranging this security cooperation, which helped build up the trust. And among many, I would like to mention Ambassadors Bill Courtney, Elizabeth Jones, Richard Jones, Andrew Weber, General Burns, Ambassador Goodby, Strobe Talbot, Steve Sestanovich, Graham Allison, Jeff Starr, Steve Steiner, Leon Firth, Nicholas Burns, Ambassador Collins, and Rose Gottemiller, and of course special gratitude to Senators Sam Nunn and Richard Lugar, whose strategic wisdom made possible the cooperative threat reduction program. I mentioned this charter on democratic partnership. Article 13 states that RK Kazakhstan considers one of its supreme priorities the development of legal regulated financial climate attractive for private internal and foreign investment and beneficial for open trade relations. The US has committed itself to cooperation with Kazakhstan in promoting economic cooperation and expanding commercial contacts aimed to increase trade and investment. Since then, I'm very glad to say the United States is constantly among the top 3 investors. Ambassador Kazakhanov mentioned that the total direct foreign investment attracted by Kazakhstan throughout the world is amounting to $320 billion. So 1/6 of it comes from the United States. That's $52.3 billion. Among the of all post-communist economies, RK is ranked the first in foreign direct investment as a percentage of GDP. And all these 30 years, we were considered a model of transition economy with strong commitment to economic liberalization and maintaining attractive investment environment through pragmatic policy choices and cooperation with the West, United States in particular. Of course, the role of the Tengiz deal was seminal. Besides Tengiz, onshore oil field jointly developed by Chevron, Kazakh Oil, Mobil, Luk-Arko at that time. They were Karachaganak, managed by ENI, BG and Texaco, and offshore Kashagan, developed by the consortium of BP Amoco, ENI, BG, Mobil, Shell, Phillips Petroleum, and others. Economic interest and investment consolidates political commitment. And while I was ambassador in DC, my good friends from the US big business companies, law firms, and think tanks were instrumental in promoting a bilateral relationship, putting a word for Kazakhstan when necessary. I would like to name just some of them. That's Kenneth Durr and Dick Matsky of Chevron, Dwayne Andreas of ADM, Lucia Noto of Mobil, Roger Sant of AES, Robert Strauss of Aiken Gump and Strauss, John Mulva of Phillips Petroleum, Peter Peterson of Blackstone, Jack Welch of General Electric, Thomas Wilner of Sherman and Sterling, Fred Starr of the Central Asia and Caucasus Institute, and many, many other prominent businessmen, lawyers, and scholars whose contribution to the development of our bilateral relations was very valuable and should be appropriately acknowledged. Thank you for your attention.
Ambassador Nurgaliev, thank you very much for that very generous sets of observations. Now let's turn to Ambassador Ordway. John.
So thank you very much. And also, I'd like to express my great appreciation to the Embassy of Kazakhstan and to GW and to the Atlantic Council for organizing this, which I think is a really great opportunity to begin this year of looking back at the course of the evolution of the relationship between the United States and Kazakhstan. Also, just pleased to note that at least two of my colleagues who served as U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan are also in on the call today, Dick Hoagland and George Kroll. But I'd like to do something a little bit different. And although I was ambassador from 2004 to 2008 and came back twice as acting chief of mission in 2011 and 2014, I'd actually like to go back and look at those very first few days and weeks and months of independence, because I think it gives us a better appreciation of how far we all have come and what a great job all of us did working together to establish this basis for the relationship, which Ambassador Nurgaliev spoke eloquently and at length about. So in December of 1991, I was working on the Soviet desk along with another young upstart named John Herbst. And my job was the Deputy Director for Multilateral and Security Affairs. And just sitting back here and combing through my memory, I came up with a list of what were the big challenges and issues for us as we looked at the Soviet Union, which was clearly on the verge of just collapse and coming apart in those last couple of months of 1991. And then the emergence of actual new independent states. So one was this whole issue of who do we recognize, when do we do it? What kind of relations are we going to have? Are we going to have embassies in all these places? That was one issue that we were grappling with. Second issue, and this was in many ways the most serious issue, was the command and control of nuclear weapons. And this pertained to 4 of the 15 former states, well, 12, because we don't really count the Baltics as former states of the Soviet Union. And that was Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus, which was where nuclear weapons were present. A third issue, which was almost, in many ways, almost important, but didn't get quite the same amount of publicity, was the whole issue of loose nukes and the possibility of proliferation of scientists into countries of concern. A fourth issue was, what do we do with that Security Council seat that the USSR had and its veto? Where does that go? A fifth issue, which really occupied a lot of our attention at the time and started the career of somebody named Dick Armitage, was starvation in the former Soviet Union. What was going to happen to all these people? So we had great concern about this. I think it was a bit overblown, but we did launch a big program of food assistance. And then sort of down in the weeds, but important to people who work in foreign ministries and State Department, is what do you do about the properties that the USSR owned, like their embassy? And what do you do about the international debt that the USSR had? So these are the kinds of things that when we woke up every morning and went to work, that we started worrying about. One of them, as I said, was this whole issue of the loose nukes. What do you do about technology and people? And this had us really, really worried. And so while the first visit of an American official to independent Kazakhstan was Secretary of State James Baker on December 18th. The second visit was Undersecretary Reggie Bartholomew on January 13th of 1992. And I was on that plane when it landed in Alma-Ata, as it was known at the time. Just a few little sort of anecdotes, things that stand in my mind were that when you organize a visit and you got an important official coming to this country, and you've got a plane coming and it needs fuel and all those other things, and you have nobody there in the ground to do it, what do you do? So I managed to convince the State Department to send somebody to each of our 3 non-Moscow stops, Kiev, we had people in Moscow, we had people in Kiev. We didn't have anybody in Minsk or in Alma-Ata. So I managed to convince them to send somebody there. And we sent somebody from the embassy in Moscow, a rather brilliant diplomat who's had a great career named Rosemary Forsyth. And Rosemary went down, and I think she actually met with a young Kazakhstani diplomat named Yerzhan Kazikhanov, who was working at the protocol office at the time. And they did a great job of setting up the schedule, arranging for the meetings, going over the agenda. But Rosemary was a political officer, and so she didn't really think about things like, how was the Air Force going to pay for the fuel so the plane could leave? So we had spotted this problem early for the Minsk stop when the Belarusians clearly said they weren't getting paid for bills that were sent to Moscow, so we had to bring cash with us to pay the bill. So we managed to scramble up some cash and got it on the plane to go into Minsk. And luckily, John Byerly, who was our advance guy there, talked the Belarusians into actually sending the bill to Moscow. So when the plane landed in Almaty, it actually had $40,000 in cash on the plane, which was a very lucky thing because the people at the airport were not going to let the plane leave until it paid for the fuel. So luckily we got to both arrive and to leave. But I think it's a symbol of the kind of uncertainty. People didn't know what to expect. You know, you would send bills where you'd sent them before and they never got paid. So people were pretty quickly learning not to trust everybody, and you had to really deal in a new and different reality. For me, the most memorable new reality that I met in Kazakhstan on that visit, which I then encountered a lot of times later, was the tradition at the banquet of taking the sheep's head and carving up the little pieces of the sheep's head and handing them out with a few wise words to distinguished members of the party that were gathered there. And so we were doing this, and Undersecretary Bartholomew, who was a rather who enjoyed putting people on the spot. Let me put it that way. So he really took to this idea very quickly, and he figured out how to exactly not only cut the sheep's head, but skewer the person that he was giving the little piece to. And the person I was next to, who was a State Department lawyer named Liz Verville, was just in terror that he was going to give her some horrible part like an eye or something like that. Luckily, she escaped, and so did I. But I always remembered that and put that experience to good use for years when I went back to Kazakhstan and had to do the same thing. But anyway, let me turn to a few more serious things and sort of go back to that list of the big issues and sort of run through what happened to them very early on. So the one was, what do we do about recognition? Well, when Secretary Baker came on the 18th, he said, yeah, we're going to recognize Kazakhstan. And that came on the 25th of December of 1991. So we were one of the very first. We have a big argument whether it was US or Turkey first, but clearly we were one of the very first countries to recognize independent Kazakhstan. And we really were one of the very first to put in an embassy and get it up and running. We quickly set up small teams of people to come in and start this process even before we had ambassadors. So Jackson McDonald went into Almaty and set up in the hotel and really got things up and running, so that when Ambassador Courtney did get there later in the year, everything was up and running and ready for him to start the serious business of diplomatic engagement. Nuclear command and control was a very serious issue. Who actually, starting on the 26th of December 1991, whatever it was, who commanded those nuclear forces? And and I was actually a little surprised to go back and reread the press accounts of Baker's December 18th visit to Almaty, because in there it says that President Nazarbayev had asserted that Kazakhstan would not release control of its nuclear weapons and give up its nuclear weapons until Russia and the other three also gave up their nuclear weapons. So it was an interesting thought. One of the first things that I think came to President Nazarbayev's mind is something that is still there, which is nuclear disarmament, and trying to leverage this opportunity to get a big step forward on nuclear disarmament. But as we all know, that in fact did not happen. Instead, as the result of, I think it's already been mentioned, some pretty deft and in-depth negotiations, we came up with a deal whereby the Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus did give up the nuclear weapons, and they were taken away from their territory, and Russia retained those nuclear weapons. The issue of the loose nukes and the people and nuclear scientists going to Iran, we spent a lot of time early on working on export controls. That was the focus of that January 13th visit I was on, trying to work to develop regulations and practices and procedures. And this is one of, I think, one of the big unsung successes in places like Kazakhstan, where in fact this turned out not to be a problem. The combination of providing support and employment for those people so they could stay in their countries where they wanted to stay, as well as targeted laws and regulations, really meant this was not a problem at any point in the post-Soviet period. And most of the other problems, the properties and the debt issue were easily resolved. The UN Security Council seat was resolved. There was no famine. The subsistence we provided helped make sure that people stayed well fed in places like Moscow. So all in all, I would say that as you look back at that period of time and all the great worries that we had, although we may still be worrying about some of them, like nuclear weapons and what to do with them, nonetheless, the great disasters, the things that we thought were down in an abyss of the post-Soviet period, turned out to not to be the case. And I would say that the reason they were not the case was because, certainly in the case of Kazakhstan, you had wise leadership that was focused on the future, that was pragmatic, and was engaged with international partners, and particularly with the United States, which I like to think played an incredibly critical role both in the early days and throughout this period, this whole 30 years, of developing the kinds of friendship and relationships in which we can accomplish a lot of these common tasks of meeting the challenges of our time. So I think I probably exceeded my 10 minutes, and I'm going to stop right there.
Thanks, John. That was wonderful. And I can tell you the problem with bringing cash to pay for airline fuel was with us when Jim Collins and I were on our way to Almaty in the fall of 1994. When we stopped in Orenburg. And good thing we had cash on the plane because we would not have gotten out of Orenburg. Okay. All right. We are a little bit over time. So I'll take questions from the audience. The first one is, let's see, from Dr. Sam Hancock. He asked, what would be the key strategic challenges for U.S.-Kazakhstan relations, taking into account the rapid rollout of China's Digital Silk Road Initiative? Ambassador Kazikhanov, would you like to take a first shot at this?
Well, I would like to say very briefly that we all know that the Belt and Road Initiative has been launched by President Xi Jinping during his visit to Kazakhstan in 2013, when he gave a lecture at the Nazarbayev University. What is important about this project, that Kazakhstan always positioned itself as a bridge between East and West. So government has been investing over the 30 years a large amount of money, worth of $30 billion, to build its infrastructure, the motor roads, the highways, the renovating airports. When this initiative has been announced, the idea came that the government project of, we call it Nurluzhol, the Bright Path, and the BRI can have a synergy of making a land bridge of transporting goods and services between Asia and Europe. So now Kazakhstan is one of the main, I would say, roads of transporting container trains from China to Europe, and Kazakhstan earning a lot of money in transit. So I think that the transit potential is one of the key objectives of the government. But of course, we clearly understand that the trade has to be open and transparent, abiding all the basic principles existing in the world trade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have two questions about, John, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something, just sort of stepping back and looking at it a little more broadly, is that one of the things that I've always been impressed by Kazakhstan is that it has a policy of maintaining balance in its relationship. And if you think of Kazakhstan, I mean, we've mentioned several times, sitting there between Russia and China, much bigger countries, much larger countries, even than very large Kazakhstan. How do you maintain your independence and your sense of yourself in that kind of an environment? And one of the things that Kazakhstan decided very early on was it wanted to have balanced relations with Russia and with China, and that it could help the balance by having equally good relationships with large partners further afield, such as the United States and the European Union. And I've always thought this has been a great policy. And for our part in the United States, we should seek to engage with Kazakhstan on those terms and do what we think is good for both of us, and not worry and not look at it simply as being, if we got to get somebody else down for us to get up. And I think that positive sum thinking that Kazakhstan has applied in this area is a good model, and it's proved to be very successful for them and for us.
Okay, thank you. We have several questions about the policy of the Biden administration towards Kazakhstan. So Andy, would you comment on that? Please,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the Biden team knows Kazakhstan very well, and clearly having even stronger relations with Kazakhstan is going to be a top priority. It's my sincere hope that President Biden himself will visit Kazakhstan. I'm embarrassed to say I don't believe we've ever had a sitting U.S. president visit Kazakhstan, and John Ordway's shaking his head. We have to work on that. Showing up is very, very, very important. So I think there will be a balance. I think we'll support the reforms, both privately and publicly, that President Tokayev is launching and trying to push through. And it's not always easy, but the United States will do what it can, both quietly and publicly, to support those reforms and just help broaden our relationship with the diversification of the Kazakhstan economy is very important. This is the century of biotechnology and clean energy, and there's so many areas where we can increase our vast partnerships with the country of Kazakhstan, and President Biden will be pushing for that.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador Niguliev.
Well, I also want to support what Andy said about the necessity to arrange the visit of the President of the United States to Kazakhstan. I remember summer 2000 when President Clinton was going to visit South Asia, and Pakistan and India were on his itinerary. And President Nazarbayev wrote a letter to President Clinton saying that I understand that's your plan, and in order to underline the role of Kazakhstan in non-proliferation and its responsible behavior in the arms control sphere, maybe it would be a good idea to make a stopover in Kazakhstan because it's on the midway location is convenient for refueling or something like this, and it will be maybe a good argument when you will be having discussions in New Delhi and Islamabad about their commitment to the NPT, citing the example of Kazakhstan. And so we got the response that it's a very good idea, but unfortunately the schedule is very tight, and we maybe sometime in future. And then the stopover was made in in Mongolia. And when we were discussing with friends here in DC, we were told that this was a lifelong dream of President Clinton to see Mongol steppes, all the desert and so on. It's just a thing to reflect for the new team in DC that Kazakhstan is still anticipating that there will be the presidential visit. And by the way, Nazarbayev visited DC 11 times throughout these 30 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, Ambassador Niguliev, we have a question from Kyle Marston, who wants to know what will Baikonur look like when we celebrate the 50th anniversary of strong U.S.-Kazakhstan relations?
You mean initially?
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that we had in mind when we were drafting the roadmap for bilateral cooperation was joint activities on the Baikonur. And I remember in '93, we, with the then Deputy Prime Minister Abelsidov, who was in charge of science and technology, including stuff related to the space research, Galim Abelsidov, visited DC and had meetings and suggesting to the to different US agencies that why don't we turn Baikonur into the international cosmoport, something which may be used by the global community for the benefit of the whole humankind. And well, it was very interesting, but at the same time, we have to take into consideration the sensitivity of the issue, how the Russians will react to this, and so on and so forth. So it didn't go that far. And so there was bilateral arrangement between Kazakhstan and Russia for the use of Baikonur. But of course, seeing the trend in Moscow about diversification and lessening its dependence on Baikonur with the construction of new space launch facilities, we would like, of course, to revisit the issue. There is a space agency in Kazakhstan, which has rather ambitious projects and is looking for partnership with interested parties from all over the world, including from the United States.
Thank you. Okay, we're almost out of time. We have several questions. I'll go with one from Mark Levin, of the National Conference of Soviet Jewry. And he asks, please discuss Kazakhstan's leading role in promoting religious tolerance in the region and beyond. Ambassador Kazakhanov, do you want to address that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a good question. And yes, Kazakhstan is multi-ethnic society. You know that we have more than 100 ethnicities living in our country. We have about 18 religious denominations. So Kazakhstan was always proud of its diversity. So our strengths in our diversity. And one of the pages, unknown pages of Kazakhstan history, and I'm sure Mark Levin knows about that, during the World War II, Jewish families were escaping from invading Nazis in the Eastern Europe, and many of them found a safe haven in Kazakhstan. So we had about more than 100,000 Jewish families living in Kazakhstan during the World War II, between 5 to 10 years. And that was an absolutely amazing page of the history of the country. So they brought a lot of culture, they made a lot of friendship, and local population was helping and supporting them. And now we are working very close with the Holocaust Museum, opening our archives and providing information on that. So I think that Kazakhstan is a very tolerant society, and we have quite sizable Jewish community, and I would be happy to tell more about that at the next occasion. Thank you.
All right, I think we have used up our allotted time. I would like to thank very much our distinguished speakers, Ambassador Kazakhanov and Abdurgaliyev, Ambassador Ordway, and Ambassador and former Assistant Secretary Weber for a very interesting conversation. I particularly love the anecdotes from the early days. And it's true, as John said, we avoided many great dangers. And that's a great tribute to the leadership both in Kazakhstan and the United States and beyond that. And thank you to GW for hosting this and making it possible. And again, I think this was a very nice event. Hopefully we could do more like this in the future.
Thanks to everyone.